It's the mid-season climax of season 2. A love interest, family drama, a secret revealed. Susie loses her plunger. It received a score of 9.4 on IMDb. And the Redditors are losing their shn. So, I must have enjoyed it too, right? Hello, and welcome to my review of Marvelous Miss Maisel, Season 2, Episode 5, the Midseason Climax. The title of the episode was Midnight at the Concord, and it received a score on IMDb of 9.4, as I mentioned earlier. However, now to talk about the composite scores, the highest composite score from a demographic and the lowest. The highest composite score from a demographic was 9.6 from females 45 plus, and consistently that is the highest demographic. The demographic it receives the highest score from. And I don't remember, I believe their scores are really even this time. However, I do think it's males 30 to 45 gave the lowest composite score. Let's take a look. Males 30 to 45, I was correct, 9.0, so very close. Only 0.6 difference. I think last week it was a 0.5 difference as well, but much better in some of the earlier episodes. The writer was Amy Sherman Palladino, and the director. And I believe that every episode she writes, she directs, and every episode her husband writes, he directs, with only 1 or 2 exceptions in Season 1. I haven't seen all the episodes of Season 2, so I can't say if that holds up in the second season as well. And the DP was M. David Mullen. If he hasn't done all the episodes, he's done most of them for this second season. Let's go over the plot outline, courtesy, as always, of Amazon Prime. Summer season at Steiner Mountain Resort continues as Moish and Shirley join the group, disturbing Abe's peace. Susie tries to ward off a new friend while keeping a low profile at the resort. Midge jumps at the opportunity to redeem herself at B. Altman. And boy, there's a lot more to that Midge plot than that implies. It's a little bit skimpy for Midge. Okay, let's go over my thoughts on the episode, mainly starting now at the plot. I have a note, it's a little in the weeds. All right, so we saw this in the first episode at the Steiner Mountain Resort, and in this one when Moish and what's the wife's name? Moish and Shirley. When they first get to the resort, and Moish looks up and says, "Oh, what are you doing in this 100-degree Fahrenheit heat?" And it's gloomy and overcast. And then when they held the bikini competition, it was all overcast, and they even make mention of the rain when Midge and Benjamin go out on the boat. And I can't help but feel the rain was written in after the fact on the set because of the rain. And every time I see the weather, the exterior shots, I just think they were shooting off season. That was the only time they could get that resort. It's a real resort, according to someone on Reddit. That's the resort. They go vacationing every summer. And because that weather is just so bad, I have to feel they had to shoot off season. But within the world of the story, they're there at the height of summer when it's, I imagine, in the 90s. But the exterior shots don't show at all. Like I said, a little in the weeds. It's something that I always think of, though, when I see the exterior shots. Nice to see the sympathetic side Joel's parents, at least in this season, because they were kind of the foil to Joel's attempts to become independent. They were less than sympathetic. I think of the bank scene when Joel's father begins to saying, "Oh, that's a goy." And he said, that person's a goy. She's not a Jew. You're not a Jew, are you? And Joel just has to bury his hands in his face. So they were quirky at best and annoying at worst, especially Moish in this episode. But their love for their son really comes through. Moish and Shirley both becoming concerned that Midge is gone, and then Joel's going to pine after her even after she's gone. So they gave complexity to those characters. And at least in this season up to now, they've just been kind of a one-dimensional joke, just quirky characters. But they added that extra dimension in this episode by showing their affection for their son. And yeah, I can't help but feel, even though we're getting now the love triangle of Benjamin, as we see in this episode, and we seem pretty clear in episode 4. Not completely clear, but I couldn't imagine they would bring in an actor like they did to play Benjamin, Zachary Levi, without also making his role larger, which would mainly be to be the second interest for Midge. I can't help but feel Joel is meant to stick around, though, because he has such a large secondary cast. He has the business friend, he's got his parents, and we see him flirting with other women. I don't think they would spend all this time on Joel unless he is at least going to be around in season 3, for at least in a significant way as well, not just as a supporting character. The conflict between Abe and Moish is given during the rec room scene, so that when Abe skips out before dinner, it's believable that he would do that. They're setting up, it was the plot mechanics. They're trying to set up Abe catching Midge doing her act. So to make all that happen, you have to have Susie come up to the Catskills. Susie's trying to get Midge a job in the Catskills where she's vacationing. Then you have to have Moish come to the same resort that Abe goes to every summer. It's conceivable there could have been another one Moish would go to. Although, I don't know, did they ever mention the backstory of Midge and Joel met at the camp? That would make a lot of sense. Anyways, that conflict between Abe and Moish, which we've seen in previous seasons, they really nail it in this episode. And it's all just to set up Abe going to the show to catch Midge. So him skipping out on dinner, I bought into because they spent so much time building it up. It didn't seem like much of a stretch to the plot to just make him not go to dinner. Do I talk about the contrivance? I guess I talk about the contrivance now. Him catching Midge at the ballroom, however, was a bit of a stretch. That ballroom, I did research on it, and I'm reading a book right now. It's a history of comedians in the U.S. from about vaudeville on to today. And they talk about that ballroom because they have a section on the Catskills. It was the book I'm reading is The Comedians by Kilpf Nesterhoff. It's very good, quite good. And the ballroom, oh yes, the Concord ballroom, hence the title of the episode. But that ballroom seats over 3,000. And comedians would work for years building up their reputation to be able to play that ballroom. And the whole trajectory of Midge is just sped up much faster than a normal comedian would ever experience without the boost of television or some big publicity. Even if she's like just a local celebrity, the fact she's playing the Concord ballroom so quickly, that's a bit of a stretch. All of it just seemed to be these years turning to get Abe to witness Midge's performance. And it was one of the reasons why I was not happy with the episode. I don't like contrivance. It's my thing. I just don't like it. There are other ways. The plot should be motivated by character. When it's contrivance, it can be motivated by character, but then usually you're writing out of character to get the character to do the thing you want them to do in the plot to make the plot go to where you want it to go. Instead of setting it up within scenes, characters having needs that they want and obstacles to prevent them. And organic needs that we've already seen built up through the story. Quite often, if it's contrivance, the needs and the obstacles are easy. They come up very quickly. There's not much development for them because they're not important. They're just there to serve the plot. Very, very rarely does a pure contrivance work for me. That's my reason why. And now moving on to Susie and Chester. So, in case you saw that and you weren't aware exactly what was going on with the crisscross, it's a classic film reference to out of center. It's a reference to the classic film Strangers on a Train, the Hitchcock film. And in the film, is it Robert Forster? No, that's the actor Quentin Tarantino used in Jackie Brown. Robert Forster. I believe it is a Robert though. Robert Wagner. We'll just have to. Oh, this is a good chance for me to stop, look it up, and then come back. So give me 1 second. I'll look it up because why not? Robert Walker. I was pretty close. In the movie Strangers on a Train, an innocent man meets a nefarious character, and this character talks about how every person has that one person in their life they wish was dead. Wouldn't it be great if I could kill that person for you and you could kill the person I want dead for me? Because then the cops will never find out who did it. They won't be able to. There'll be no motive. There'll be motiveless crime, which is very hard for the cops to solve because there will be no connection. And these two people just met on a train. And so that's where the crisscross comes from. And Susie, so the reason that's all significant is Susie's living a little bit in denial. And he keeps saying, we're so similar. And she's saying, we're not similar at all. Alex Borstein's so great. I say this every episode review because I just love her. The acting in the show is awesome, right? Tony Shalhoub in this episode playing both the drama and the comedy. When he's driving home, you could see his eyes are kind of red. You can feel the anger coming out of those eyes. All of it's great. But I point out Alex Borstein every episode that I discuss. Anyway, so the reason why all that is significant is he says we're the same. And Alex Borstein goes, oh, we're not the same at all. And she's there. She's not paying for room or board, or she's not paying. She's not doing any work. She's lying that she's a plumber, even holding the plunger. So she's not that different from him. And there's a lot of that within the show. A lot of characters have false consciousness. They believe they're one way, but really it's conflicted or complex. We see that with Midge, with her desire to be an independent woman, yet she often kind of falls for the temptations of the era, being the beautiful wife or the beautiful scion of a lower upper class family. She falls into those temptations. She gets upset when she can't compete in the bikini competition. She loves that she's back at the Revlon counter at B. Altman, even though she should be worried. She enjoys being at the Catskills for 2 months, even though she should be focused on her career. She has those temptations of her lifestyle that she was born into that make it hard for her to be truly independent. And I think that's the one way the show is a subtle critique of the attitude and the role that women had in the era. And Susie, we can see that a little bit. This is very, very light. That theme is touched on very lightly and in Susie's interactions with, and I wrote down the character's name just so I could be thorough. Chester. Chester's the one who says crisscross. Midge and Benjamin. Midge and Benjamin get closer. That's right. So the two big contrivances were the reason why I didn't care for the episode. Contrivance of, and that was a smaller one. I even said that I thought the way they got Abe to go to the Concord ballroom, that worked because they spent so much time setting it up. And same with Midge playing at the ballroom. So, in the end, that was fine. It was a contrivance because there's a coincidence that those characters are there, but they spent so much time setting it up, fine. However, Midge and Benjamin in the convertible, that was just pure contrivance. B. Altman has a girl that gets fired, so then they need Midge to work at the counter. That's a contrivance. Did we see that character getting fired? Did we see that character getting fired? Did we spend any time learning why that character could be important? Or did we, so Benjamin going back because of a bowl of cereal, that was just out of thin air. All these things, writer was just pulling out of thin air to get Midge in the car with Benjamin to get that romance going. I didn't care for it. I wished it had been approached differently. However, even though I was not happy with how they got Midge and Benjamin into the car, the scene of her responding to the radio was brilliant. One of the better stand-up scenes. I thought, if we count that as one of her stand-up scenes in this episode, that and her at the ballroom were amazing, because they revealed character, or they were centered on character conflict. They were believable, at least in the execution of the routine. And the scene in the car was nice because we got to see a little bit of the backdrop of the era. So it was world building, the way she was ripping off these fake news stories, which helped us, the viewer, learn about the era, while also seeing her and Benjamin growing a bond because of that. It was great. It was like what a dance number, a musical number should do. They used that comedic scene in the same way to highlight character conflict and to move the story forward. Lizzie Borden was a real play. Like I was talking about the world building, I like the way the show uses the the songs in the background, and that they've brought in real life figures. The author of The Life and Death of Cities, Jane Jacobs, I think that was her name, the author, Jane Jacobs, was in season 1. And in this season, the play that Benjamin and Midge go to, someone on Reddit revealed, was a real play. It closed after 2 performances on Broadway. That was a really nice find. So obscure, but yet accurate. And so when you use that to be very broad, because the way they talk about how they hate trial scenes, there was grounding for that because it was a real play. And that's great. When you can be broad but find grounding so that you don't go off too far, that's amazing. Great when you can do it. Midge and Benjamin have chemistry. I think Midge and Joel's character have chemistry. Amy Sherman Palladino is really good at creating chemistry between characters, and it's here too. So Benjamin will be a really good foil for Joel, or antagonist for Joel, for Midge's affection. He's a very strong character. In fact, they've made Joel so weak, the audience begins to, he's the underdog. The audience begins to sympathize for Joel. It's really good, that turn that they've done with Joel's character this season. But, however, Benjamin seems to be offering complete acceptance of Midge. Joel does accept her as a comedian. He just feels unworthy because he won't be able to, he doesn't have the confidence to be able to take her jokes about him, and her father has the same response. And so maybe there will be a middle ground between Midge trying to be completely honest and then also having empathy for the people she's making fun of. If she can find that and Joel can find more confidence, there could be a reason for them to come back together. After his infidelity, if there were no children, they should be apart. But with the children, as the audience, and as Amy Sherman Palladino spends time with Joel, we just kind of hope they will come back together, and she's giving us reasons why they should. However, by building up Benjamin, where we get the tension, will they come back together? Will she get with Benjamin? Because Benjamin seems to accept everything that she is, and she revealed to him her life as a comedian. Remember, Joel, she did not reveal it to Joel. Joel discovered it and accepted it, just was not able to see himself as part of her life. But Benjamin accepted it point blank, and he wanted that. He wanted that, someone weird. And the last point about the plot I wanted to talk about was how it shows Midge juggling those 2 lives very well, something I referred to earlier. That in one hand, she's the airy debutante in Upper Manhattan, and on the other, she's hanging out in the Greasy Spoon stage delicatessen with Susie, talking about how she can further her career, and then later on with Benjamin just going there to eat. And even the world that she lives in, the one that she does get some superficial satisfaction from, the sort of Edith Wharton upper New York socialite world, and in her case even upper socialite Jewish world, it gives satisfaction, but it also punishes those who fail the standard by even the smallest degree. So even though she's married still, because her and Joel have separated, she can't compete in the swimsuit competition. And the second world that she's in, second world that she's in is a world where she's able to get some degree of independence and agency, but it's also a world that's filled with thugs and the mafia, which we've seen with Susie already. And in the book that I'm reading, The Comedians, it points out if you were a stand-up comic or you were doing vaudeville, you were working for the mob, because all those clubs in New York and entertainment venues across the country, the mob had their hand in. If you were an entertainer, you had to deal with rowdy and bored audiences. If you were an entertainer, you had to deal with poverty. If you were an entertainer, you had to deal with drug abuse. If you were an entertainer, you had to deal with harassment by the police. All these things are reasons not to get involved in that world, reasons that make it so that refined society, proper society, could look down on someone being in that world. But, let me get my shirt, always problem with the shirt. But she gets agency. She can find creative release and be who she wants and say what she wants in that world. And so that's the reason for her to give up the refined world of Upper Manhattan and try to make her way in the rough and tumble world of the entertainer. And the show has not come down on either side. We see her trying to straddle both worlds to varying degrees of success. The last thing I want to mention, my final, in case you missed it, was again about the world building. And again, I get this care of The Comedians by Kilf Nesterhoff. And that is that even within the world of the entertainers who are kind of looked down upon, there were different strata. And we see that with the agent, Harry Drake. When Susie goes to visit him in season 1, he's in a refined restaurant with refined people. And when she meets her clients or other agents or other creatives, it's in the Greasy Spoon. And there was actually there were defined places and a pecking order for the comedians in New York City. The highest place, the high end, was Lindy's. So if we were to catch Harry Drake, this would have been at Lindy's. And that's where all of the top talent wanted to be seen. Then below that was the Stage Deli. That's where Midge is. And the agents of these second-tier comedians all had their offices above that restaurant. And there is a door that says stage. You can see it, some of the scenes that led to a place for the comedians to perform. Below that, and just around the corner, the rival for the Stage Deli was the Carnegie Deli. These are all famous places from New York's history. And so that was just one cut below the Stage Deli. And then the lowest of the low is Hanson's Ice Cream Parlor, and that's where the real dregs went. And by dregs, I don't mean that as a comment on their character, just the lowest, the grade Z of the comedian world would have to go there to try to find work. And that's it for this episode. So I hope you enjoyed my critique, and I hope you will join me again for my critique of episode number 6, coming soon, if not already available to be streamed. That's all for now. Take care and be well.